How about the old big noon kickoff window yesterday? Ohio State 44, Penn State 31. Now, if I were to tell you that score, and you were sitting over here and you watched the game, but someone else was over here and they didn't watch the game, would you be the guy who says, but that's not really the way it played out? That final score is a little misleading. Is it a little misleading? Is it? Because need I remind you guys one of many famous quotes from Meemaw. And one of those famous quotes, of course, was quarters can tell lies, but games tell the story. What was the story of this game yesterday? Well, it was first off a weekly reminder that football games are 4 quarters for a reason. And it doesn't matter if you lead with 15 minutes to go or 12 minutes to go, because if you just cough the ball up and then they break the dam open and score like 28 points in 6 or 7 minutes, it doesn't really matter what you did lead by. I thought Penn State probably played as well as they possibly could, given the circumstances yesterday, and yet therein lies my point. Ohio State still up 20, and Penn State's driving in what ended up being garbage time. How did this all go down, though? Do you remember, about a year and a half ago, I guess, it would have been the spring of 2020. There was a National Signing Day, and then there was one big name left out there. And I just want to take you back. Because at the time, a lot of people asked one question, and I want to take you back. I want to take you back to the spring of 2020. National Signing Day comes and goes, and there's one kid left out there. He's the number 1 rated player in the country, and he takes his announcement past signing day, and he wants to make some visits. And it was the COVID year, so things were all out of whack anyway. And people started asking, when we would do segments on that guy on this show, why do you keep talking about him? It's just one guy. Why is that such a big deal? That guy ended up being JT Tuimoloau. He committed to Ohio State. Let me explain to you what he did yesterday. 6 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, 2 interceptions, one of them for a pick 6, 1 pass breakup, which led to a tip ball and another interception. That was not his October. That was not his 2022 to date. That was his Saturday afternoon. That's why we talked about him as often as we did. That's why you recruit like Ohio State does. Because you never know on any given Saturday, or every given Saturday in their case, when one of those stars, one of those guys, one of those transcendent type athletes, a word that's a little overused, but this performance was transcendent. You never know when you're going to need that. And they needed it yesterday. So they pulled that out of the bag, and defense won a game. I want to get to that in just a second. Here's what I'll grant you, because there's a whole lot of angles to go at this game from. And I see a lot of you going at it from the angle of, well, Ohio State got lucky, or Ohio State got away with one, or they escaped. Well, yeah, they did escape. And there's some things I'll grant you here. I will grant you that we saw Ohio State bleed. I don't know when anyone suggested they were invincible. And you're talking to a guy here that's got them rated number 1 in the country. And yet, even I picked Penn State to cover in the game. So, largely, we got what we expected over here. They bled. We saw some vulnerability. We didn't see Xbox, PlayStation-esque offensive rhythm. We certainly saw corners give up some big plays. Defensively, we saw them give up some big plays. Tackling was not great. I'll grant you all that. But then, once I grant you that, you got to be quiet and let me have a chance. And you need to grant me that Ohio State still led this thing 44-24 with 6 minutes to go. And that really is what I would like you to take away. All the phases in this game count the same when you score. Special teams, defense, offense, it all counts the same. There's a reason why, when JTT makes a play like that and then you end up scoring, there's a reason why they count that as 6, just like they count a 90-yard bomb from quarterback to receiver as 6. It's a complementary game. You get to play all 3 phases. And when you recruit all those elite players, you recruit them to score in some cases. You recruit them to take over games in some cases. So before I even saw the way this thing ended yesterday, had so many people texting me. And what they said was, yeah, Ohio State won, but. And I knew what was coming. Because I got to see a little bit of this game yesterday before Oklahoma State started against Kansas State. And I knew what I was going to see. I was going to see a lot of, Ohio State won, but. This is the crowd that expects them to win by 50 every week, okay? So totally unrealistic premise, totally unrealistic starting point. Then when they don't meet your unrealistic expectations, you blame them instead of yourself. It's really fun. Sports writers do the same thing. So fans aren't the only one there. But they don't fulfill your expectation level. They don't win by 35. And then you get the haters out there who start to come at you with this little refrain. Now, you probably heard this a lot yesterday. Here's what it sounded like to me. They lost or they trailed the same Penn State team that fill in the blank. Got boat raced by Michigan, etc., etc. They didn't face the same Penn State team you've ever seen this season yesterday because Penn State hasn't played at that level all year. And that is the commonality when big-time teams like Ohio State go on the road. You expect to get your opponent's best shot. You get their best environment. It's why I never get surprised when you see Sean Clifford, for example, throwing for, what did he throw for, Jesse, over 350 yards? It doesn't surprise me because you're getting a one-off performance, essentially. You will not see Sean Clifford play like that again this year. Now, the counter to that is, what do you mean play like that? He threw 3 interceptions. When you can't run the ball better than Penn State can, that's baked into the risk-reward. In order to throw the ball as many times as they ask Clifford to throw the ball, you're going to put yourself in vulnerable positions. And eventually, when you've got guys like Harrison and Tuimoloau on your defensive line, eventually you're going to have turnovers forced on you. And I want to emphasize the word forced. It's not like he just put the ball on the ground. They weren't unforced, so they were all forced. It's part of the game of football, guys. So then, as I'm fielding all those little complaints, I get another complaint. You're really going to love this one. Maybe you heard this one too. Quote, I don't know about Ryan Day. This is an actual exchange that I'm going to read you. I'm just not going to reveal the source because you don't know him anyway. Text to me yesterday. I look down at my phone. I see a text. I don't know about Ryan Day, bro. I say, what do you mean you don't know about him? Well, his play calling is a little suspect. And so I respond and I essentially tell this fine individual, he'd wrap you into an intellectual pretzel less than 10 seconds into a conversation about play calling. But even if you're right, I still don't care. You know what play he called? You know what play I love from Ryan Day? It came after last year, and he called the following play. It sounds a little something like this. We're not good enough on defense. I'm going to go hire Jim Knowles. And he did. And now Ohio State's been on the ropes twice this year, week 1 and yesterday, and defense has won 2 games for him. Guess who hired Jim Knowles? Guess who called that play? Ryan Day called that play. So I'm fine with Ryan Day's play calling. They've done what it takes to win every game so far this year, and they're going to be a national championship contender. Yesterday was not something that knocked them off of any perch. What yesterday was a reminder that every team in this sport can bleed. There is no truly transcendent elite team in this game this year. Bama's already lost. Georgia got taken to the wire against Missouri. Georgia's got a big test this weekend against Tennessee. Ohio State's been pressed a couple of times now. That's not a bad thing for you guys out there, the competitive balance crowd. That's not a bad thing. That's the final ingredient. I don't know if a lot of people realized this yesterday. Like I said, you've already seen Bama struggle. You've seen Georgia look a little wobbly. But Ohio State, since week 1, you hadn't really seen that from them, had you? Until yesterday. And once you saw that, who else you got out there? You got Michigan out there. They played a one-possession game against Maryland. They play a low margin for error caliber of football anyway. You've got Tennessee, who's still kind of new to the party, so even though you don't admit it, everyone thinks they're going to drop a game at some point. Plus, you know they've got several elite teams left to play in their own right. Where is the unstoppable force? Where's that immovable object? It's not there. And so if you want the recipe for a wild November, if you want the recipe for one of the more unpredictable stretches from the last few weeks of the season into eventually your playoff, this is it. That was it. That was the final ingredient you needed yesterday. I really don't think people have, let me not say people. I'm trying to get away from saying that. I think there's a chunk of the college football public that has no concept of what it's like to play football on the road. I just don't think they have it. And you don't have to have been in the game. You don't have to have coached. You don't have to have played. It really helps if you go to these events. I mean, maybe I've got a little advantage because I get to go to one every single weekend. But guys, it's so hard to play on the road. In this sport, in college football, it is the hardest thing to do is play on the road and go win on the road. These coaches, these players, when they talk about it all the time, they're saying that for a reason. It's not excuse making because they talk about their home field advantage the same way. It's really, really hard. And then when you get your opponent's best shot, Ohio State took their fastball yesterday. Yeah, they gave up some big plays. They won the game. Defense ended up turning over a game. It flipped. Defense flipped a game they otherwise would have lost in all likelihood. That's a very good thing, because that's how you end up winning. You got to have multiple ways that you can win. But the Xbox crowd out there, I just don't think grasps this stuff. You look at all of this stuff as if it's in a vacuum. You look at those players as if they're robots. And when they don't do everything that a player with that many stars next to his name is supposed to do, that team's flawed. They're flawed. You didn't need to watch yesterday to know Ohio State's a flawed team, or Bama, or Georgia, or anyone. There's no perfect team out there. Right now, the odds to win the Big Ten championship are Ohio State minus 425, Michigan plus 400. That's it. Illinois is next, and they're way behind the pack. And that's essentially a line on the game. That's essentially a line on Michigan at Ohio State. Futures market right now has that number between 8 and 12. I don't know exactly where it is right now. Everybody's counting down to it. Everybody's sitting around waiting for it, because there probably is not a losable game, barring disaster, for Ohio State or Michigan from now until then. I thought that it was a game that was not mistake-free, but a game where Ohio State continued to learn a lot more about how many different ways they can win a game. They didn't run the ball great yesterday. They certainly gave up some chunk plays defensively. They also wrecked the game defensively. Okay, and C.J. Stroud made several throws over the middle. There was a little clunkiness to their offense early on. There was a little rhythm imbalance. They had to settle for threes, which was one of the keys to Penn State staying in this game that we talked about. All that happened, and my point is they still won. So I thought it was a good day for Ohio State. Someone asked me, what do you make of that for Penn State? I think that they have to dust themselves off and then continue moving on. You know, unless you're going to be of the mentality that, okay, well, now that we can't win the Big Ten, we just fold up shop for the rest of the year. No, you've got to be a competitor. Now, I think the valid question could be, as producer Jesse has been talking about nonstop since he got to the building today, will we see Drew Aller more? I don't know. Logic would say maybe, probably, possibly. They play Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers, and Michigan State to finish off the season. They're a two-loss team. They could be a 10-2 team. That's a very, very good year where I come from. Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure to leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.